The moment the DM popped up, I knew I was done playing nice. Stop nitpicking and just approve. 7 words. That's all it took to turn a Tuesday into a ticking bomb. I stared at the screen long enough to feel the blood warm up behind my ears. My hands didn't shake, but something behind my rib cage went still, like the air right before a thunderstorm. I was alone in the break room, microwaving the same sad soup I'd had since they cut per diem, and there it was. Permission to ignore federal compliance from someone who still thought the I-9 was optional if you smiled during onboarding. I didn't answer her. I didn't argue. I clicked screenshot, saved it into a fresh folder titled HR Overrides, NOV, timestamped the day's audit log, and shut my laptop without finishing lunch. You don't yell at a moving train. You step off the tracks, take notes, and pray the brakes work before the bridge ends. They call me the brake pedal. That's fine. Every company's got someone who triple checks dates and refuses to just push it through. I'm that someone. I've flagged fake green cards, IDs that expired during Obama's first term, and one guy who listed 2 different birthdays 3 days apart, one on his license, one on his W-4. HR said it was a typo. I said it was a felony. They rolled their eyes, told me I was stalling hiring momentum, and copied the COO on a gentle nudge to get with the program. The program apparently being just approve. Let me pause here, just for a second. If you've ever worked in corporate, you know exactly how this plays out. Someone with too much ambition and too little knowledge decides you're in the way, and suddenly you're the problem. If this story already feels familiar, do me a favor. Hit subscribe and like the video. 97% of people listen without subscribing, and this right here, this is what helps the team keep these stories alive. All right, back to it. The junior HR lead's name is Brooke. Fresh out of her MBA, full of buzzwords like agile scaling and workforce velocity. I don't dislike her. I pity her. She thinks clean paperwork is a suggestion and not a federal requirement. That DM she sent was probably a joke to her, a flex in the middle of her Slack thread about what brunch spots were hiring. But to me, it was a live wire. That same afternoon, they pulled me into a fast sync. Brooke, her director, and 2 others I didn't recognize, probably DEI hires with people strategy titles and 0 grounding in actual law. We're onboarding too slow, the director said, flipping through a laminated chart like that was supposed to impress me. We've got 43 new hires pending and legals breathing down our neck about staff shortages. I said, then they can breathe down mine because I'm not approving incomplete I-9s. They laughed. Not fake laughed, real laughed. One of them muttered something about compliance theatrics. I didn't even blink. Later is when the fines arrive, I said. Silence. Then a cough. Then Brooke chirped, well, we'll just proceed. You can fix the forms once they're already working. That right there, that was the cliff, and they jumped off it like lemmings in heels. When I got back to my desk, I drafted a new audit sheet, just 3 columns, missing docs. HR override by timestamp. That's it. No drama, no editorializing, just the facts. Then I created a folder called Exception Tracker, Q4, and started logging. Every mismatch, every blank section 2, every ID that looked like it had been printed on someone's home printer. I didn't say a word. Just tracked, logged, and waited. By EOD, I had 6 entries, all approved, all traceable, and all sitting on top of a landmine. The stand-up wasn't even on my calendar. Just a quick sync pinged 15 minutes before lunch with a subject line so cheery it could have been printed on a coffee mug. Let's align onboarding. Translation? They were about to make something reckless sound collaborative. The HR director stood at the whiteboard, dry erase marker already squeaking out numbers like she was solving hunger with a pie chart. We're behind, she said without looking up. 43 hires this week, 28 more by Friday, and too many bottlenecks. She looked at me. Guess where? I didn't flinch. Compliance isn't a bottleneck, it's a guardrail. Brooke snorted. Literally snorted. We're bleeding candidates. One more delay and ops will just start skipping us entirely. We're onboarding too slow. Let's just get people working. We'll fix the forms later. I locked eyes with her and said, later is when fines arrive. They didn't even pretend to consider it. The room split into chuckles and shrugs like I just quoted Shakespeare at a kegger. The director waved her hand like I was a stubborn fly and said, "Approve everything. Flag them for later cleanup. We need bodies." Bodies, I repeated under my breath. That's how they saw it. Warm bodies with half-filled forms and no audit trail, as if ICE wouldn't care because we met our staffing quota. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask if they remembered what happened to the last company that got caught rubber stamping I-9's $1.6 million in penalties, public embarrassment, and a hiring freeze that kneecapped their operations for 9 months. But I knew better. You don't lecture people who've already decided you're overreacting. You document, quietly, precisely, with timestamps. So I went back to my desk and opened a blank doc titled I-9 Exception Summary. I listed the names of every pending file. Next to each, I added a column, Missing Docs, Override by, Date Approved. I didn't editorialize, just the data. Some had no Section 2, some listed visas that didn't match names, and 2 had no ID at all, just a post-it note saying "See attached" with nothing attached. By the time I finished, I had 10 rows, 10 liabilities rubber-stamped like they were invoices for printer toner. I printed the sheet, signed and dated it, and added it to the compliance binder I kept locked in my filing cabinet, the one no one else ever touched because it was too much paper. They wanted plausible deniability. I'd make damn sure mine was ironclad. If they were going to play fast and loose with legal documents, they could do it without dragging my name through the mud. I wasn't going to jail for a junior HR rep who thought W-2s were optional if the new hire had a nice smile. Brooke passed my desk later that day, iced coffee in one hand, sunglasses still on indoors. "Thanks for not making it weird in there," she chirped. "We'll circle back next week." I didn't look up. Just said, "Circle back all you want, just don't erase the tracks behind you." She laughed like I was being cute, but the binder under my hand was getting heavier by the hour, and it wasn't filled with forms. It was filled with receipts. Subject line, I-9 Exception. Overrides, Risk and Approval. 12 words, 5 attachments, 1 bombshell. I typed the email like I was cutting wire in a minefield. Slow, deliberate, fingers steady, even though my stomach had that hollow, drop through the elevator floor sensation. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burned off sometime between override number 13 and watching Brooke giggle through her third onboarding slideshow while Section 2 sat blank on my desk. This wasn't a tantrum. This was an airbag deploying before the impact. I kept the body tight. Per verbal directive during this morning's onboarding alignment sync, HR has instructed compliance to approve incomplete or undocumented I-9s for immediate hire. Then I listed the missing components by field: blank ID verification boxes, incomplete document types, mismatched social security numbers. Line by line, zero commentary, just the exact language from the federal handbook. I cited Paragraph 274A.2 but of the USCIS rulebook because no one argues when the law has a paragraph number. Then the key sentence in bold: I do not approve these exceptions, proceeding under HR directive as named below. Under that, I wrote 3 names. I CC'd legal, I CC'd the CFO, I didn't CC HR because Brooke doesn't read beyond the second sentence unless it contains emojis. I tagged each attachment with timestamps and wrote a short description. 10:04 entry, missing Section 2. 10:06, no documents attached. 10:07, name mismatch, ID versus SSN. I didn't speculate, didn't accuse, just cited, labeled, and logged. Then I clicked on options. Read receipts, enabled. Delivery confirmations, enabled. Email retention, permanent. No auto deletion. Then I opened the printer queue, fed in clean letterhead, and printed 2 hard copies. One for my locked binder, one for the off-site folder I kept in a labeled envelope under my spare tire. When you've worked in compliance long enough, you don't hope things go well. You prepare for when they don't. Hope is not a plan. A paper trail is. My hand hovered over the send button for a beat. I thought about the last time we ignored an audit signal. A decade ago at my last firm, the IRS had flagged missing employment docs. HR had panicked, then tried to forge files. It didn't end with a fine. It ended with 3 people fired and 1 escorted out in cuffs. I hit send, and just like that, it was out of my hands. I clicked over to the access log and noted the timestamp. 11:37 a.m. The storm hadn't hit yet, but the air was wrong. The kind of wrong you feel in your joints before a tornado. I closed the file, locked the cabinet, and stared out the window. It was still a normal day. People laughed near the vending machine. Brooke walked past again, her heels clicking like she was auditioning for a Hulu office dramedy. She waved. I didn't wave back. This is the part where most people think the explosion happens right away. It doesn't. That's the trick. The room doesn't catch fire immediately after you smell smoke. It waits, pretends everything's fine. Then the ceiling drops. So I went back to work. I filed another form, logged another mismatch, drank the cold coffee I'd forgotten about. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done, but the fuse had been lit, and I knew exactly how long it was. I stopped going home on time. Not because they asked, because I couldn't stop thinking about what we were sleepwalking into. Every name on that onboarding list felt like a pin pulled from a grenade I was now babysitting. I'd leave the main office lights off, just the glow of my monitor and the sting of burnt coffee keeping me company. No one noticed. Compliance doesn't get noticed until it's too late. The backlog wasn't just messy, it was radioactive. I started with the October files. The first new hire had 2 different social security numbers, one on the W-4, one on the I-9. I checked the E-Verify submission. Wrong number. No flags, just someone too lazy or too scared to call it out. I added it to the new tracker I built on my second screen. Column 1, missing or invalid. Column 2, person who overrode. Column 3, fix by or else. By the end of that file set, I had 3 more with no document attached at all, just a note that said, manager has originals. Spoiler alert, manager had nothing. I checked the HR folder. Empty. I sent one polite ping. Hey, can you confirm this ID was received? No reply. 10 minutes later, the status changed to finalized. That night, I found a birthday that matched the employee's license, but not their actual W-2. You want to guess how many days we had to fix that before it became a liability? 3. 3 business days. We were on day 7. I asked HR the next morning for a remediation day, a single day to freeze onboarding and clean up the files. I phrased it like a friendly suggestion, even dropped the buzzwords they loved. Propose strategic pause to ensure full form fidelity pre-filing. Brooke responded in under a minute, not now. We're hiring too fast. Too fast for the law, apparently. I didn't argue. I just added 6 more entries to the tracker. Each row had a real person's name next to a fake or broken form. I wasn't thinking about cover-your-ass politics anymore. I was thinking about Miguel, the quiet janitor who always nodded at me in the morning, and what would happen if his form got flagged. Or that kid Jenna from shipping, who started the same week her mom died and probably had no idea HR hadn't filed her paperwork right. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about everyone they dragged down when the audit hit, and they needed someone, anyone, to blame. By week's end, my spreadsheet had 48 entries, 48 undocumented, incomplete, or legally compromised I-9s, each one approved by someone who'd probably never read the actual federal guidelines. Most overrides came from Brooke, but a handful had been pushed through by her assistant, using the same shortcut macro, Alt-S, Enter, Done, Stamp, and Forget. Every time I clicked Save, it felt like sharpening a blade. At 11:03 p.m. on Friday, I opened a new sheet titled Fines Projection and started matching violations with the published federal penalty tiers. Missing signature, $252. No verification, $100. Pattern violations, higher. I ran the numbers. The total hit $200K before I even got to the October 12th batch. I leaned back in my chair, eyes burning, jaw locked. I could see it now. The panic, the desperate finger pointing, the scramble for a name to hang it all on. And if I didn't stay ahead of it, that name would be mine. The woman who didn't stop it, the one who approved. They'd forget the email. They'd ignore the logs. But they'd remember the title, Records and Compliance. That was me. And if I was going down, I wasn't going quietly. So I kept logging, kept printing, kept backing up files to 2 drives, one in my desk, one in the glove box of my car. The audit hadn't come yet, but I was ready. It hit on a Tuesday. 8:14 a.m. sharp. My inbox pinged with a subject line that read like a death sentence. Notice of intent to fine. I-9 violations. from the Department of Homeland Security, no less. It was addressed to the company's general counsel, but I was CC'd. Fourth name down, sandwiched between Brooke and the CFO. I opened it. Scanned, reread, didn't blink. $235,000. That's how much negligence costs when you stack it in paper and file it wrong. I sat still. Let the words burn a little. Not out of shock, confirmation. I already knew what was in that envelope before they clicked send. The dates they cited? October 4th, October 6th, October 7th. The same damn dates on my tracker, the same missing verifications, the same initials in the overridden by column. Every box they listed matched one of mine. I didn't need a forensic audit. I already had the evidence, and they had just validated it with a 6-figure receipt. HR's group chat went dead for 10 full minutes. Then it exploded. Pings flying like shrapnel. What is this? Was this a mistake? Did legal know? Whose responsibility was this? Then the panic pivoted. A new thread opened, private, titled Compliance Damage Control. I didn't reply. By noon, legal summoned me, no calendar invite, just a knock at the door and a whisper, "Board wants you upstairs. Bring everything." Emergency session. The long glass table, every seat filled. Legal on one end. The CFO mid-table, jaw clenched so hard I thought his molars might fuse. Brooke sat with her arms crossed like a brat on timeout, eyes flicking around like she couldn't decide who to charm first. The HR director wouldn't meet my gaze. The CEO walked in last, holding one piece of paper, my email, printed, highlighted, date stamped. He didn't speak at first, just walked slowly down the length of the table, then held it up so everyone could see. One line had been circled in red. I do not approve these exceptions, proceeding under HR directive. The room went cold. This, he said, voice low, is why we're not bankrupt this morning. No one breathed. No one dared. Legal cleared her throat and spoke into the silence. The notice from DHS lists 37 individual violations with specific dates. All match entries logged by compliance in October. The override trail leads back to HR. Then she looked at me. Would you confirm that, please? I opened the binder, slid a copy of the exception summary forward, then the backup tracker, then the spreadsheet printed just the night before, the one with projected fines next to each line item. I didn't raise my voice, didn't smirk, just read aloud. 48 flagged entries, 37 missing or incomplete fields, all documented, all previously reported. Brooke made a small choking sound. The CFO turned to her and asked flatly, "Did you override these?" She stammered something about delegation, about momentum, about assumptions. The CEO cut her off. "We're not here to blame. We're here to contain." But blame was already bleeding into every glance. I leaned back, let them talk, let them sweat. I had nothing left to prove. I had done my job twice over and still got laughed at for it. Now my name was the only one not tied to liability. They thought I was overreacting. That compliance was red tape. That no one checks these things until it's too late. Well, it was too late. And now they were about to find out what else I'd been documenting. The pivot to blame came faster than I expected. I barely had time to put my binder back in my lap before the HR VP leaned in, face taut, voice trembling from rehearsed indignation. "Let's be clear," she said, eyes darting toward the board. Compliance signed off. He approved. He. She called me he. That should have been my first clue she was bluffing. Hadn't even bothered to confirm the gender of the person she was throwing under the bus. It wasn't just desperation. It was laziness, wrapped in arrogance and tied with a bow of HR doublespeak. I didn't flinch, didn't snap. I just reached into my folder, pulled out the printed access log, and slid it down the table like a poker hand I'd been holding for weeks. "This," I said calmly, "is the approval trail. Each timestamp, user ID, and system authorization tied to every I-9 submission for the month of October." Legal took the page, eyes narrowing. The CEO glanced down and gave a single nod. "And this," I continued, tapping the final column, "is mine. Every entry shows my status as view only. My name never touched the approve button, not once." I let that sit for a second before I pulled up the email on the shared screen. One click, full screen, One line highlighted, I do not approve these exceptions. Proceeding under HR directive. Counsel, who'd been scribbling notes like her pen was on fire, suddenly stopped moving. The CFO exhaled hard enough to fog glass. The room, again, went silent. Brooke tried to speak, but I was already opening another file. This time it was the Slack thread. Clean screenshots, date verified, stored in 2 different cloud backups and on a thumb drive I wore on a lanyard like a damn security badge. I enlarged the screen. Here's the direct instruction, I said. October 3rd. From Brooke M., time-stamped 10:27 a.m. I pointed to the exact line. Stop nitpicking and just approve. The HR VP, now visibly sweating, tried to pivot. That was informal. It wasn't an official directive. Your initials, I said, without looking up, are logged next to every override submitted between October 3rd and 11th. I didn't personally approve everyone, she snapped, voice rising. I turned. Finally, looked her square in the eye. But your login credentials did. Your assistant used your macro from your machine. Same IP, same device ID. Do you want to go over the IT logs? Legal lifted one brow. The CEO leaned back in his chair, arms folded. Answer the question. She didn't. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. That phase had passed somewhere between my second binder and the moment I watched Brooke laugh about bodies in a hiring chart. I didn't need vengeance. I didn't need some dramatic walkout with middle fingers blazing. I needed the truth. In ink. In record. In front of every executive who had ever side-eyed compliance like it was optional. So I closed the folder, sat back, and said evenly, I'm not here for apologies. I'm here so this doesn't happen again. The chair of the board, who hadn't spoken until now, finally broke the silence. Let's take a short recess, he said, voice low. We have decisions to make. And just like that, they all stood. Some left in silence, some muttered into phones. HR scattered like ants from a kicked nest. But I didn't move. I just watched the screen, the one showing Brooke's Slack message, flicker quietly on the wall. 7 words, still glowing, and every single one of them was mine now. They came back from the recess with their suits straightened, voices lower, and faces rearranged into that expression executives wear when they're trying to pretend the building isn't already on fire behind them. But this time, no one tried to pin it on me. No one called me dramatic or overcautious or too thorough. That version of the story had died during the break, probably along with a few draft resignation letters. The CEO looked at me, eyes harder now. Can this be fixed? I didn't answer right away. I wanted them to sit in it for a second longer. The weight of $235,000 in federal fines, of public audits, of possibly losing future contracts for systemic procedural failure. A phrase no investor likes to read in disclosures. Then I said, yes, if you're willing to actually fix it, not just patch it. The CFO leaned forward. Define fix. I pulled out the remediation plan, printed, signed, and already spiral bound, not because I'm petty, but because I knew they wouldn't take it seriously if it came in an email. Step 1. Re-verify every affected I-9 within 10 business days. That includes missing Section 2s, mismatched data, and undocumented entries. Step 2. Correct documentation errors and attach proper substantiation for each. Step 3. Self-report the remediation to DHS with a legal acknowledgement of steps taken and chain of custody logs. Brooke's mouth opened. I raised a hand. Don't interrupt. Step 4. Mandatory retraining for every hiring manager, every HR staffer, and every assistant who so much as touched onboarding this quarter. No exceptions. Step 5. Implement a rolling audit protocol, weekly, not monthly, until clean reports are achieved for 3 straight months. They all stared at me like I'd grown horns. Can we do all that internally? Legal asked, eyes narrowing. We could, I replied, but not with the current structure. I flipped to the final page, my terms. Now the silence was thick. I let it build. Then I slid the document forward. Title, Compliance Restructure and Authority Addendum. First, I said, written indemnity for all actions I refuse to approve, retroactive to October 1st. Second, Full authority to halt onboarding activity at any stage where compliance risk exceeds federal thresholds. That authority cannot be overridden without legal and board concurrence. And third, I said, locking eyes with the CEO, my title changes to compliance officer with direct access to board sessions, including audit and ethics committees. Someone cleared their throat. Nervous. I didn't break eye contact. Oh, and one more thing, I added, flipping the folder's last tab. A single-page policy edition, clean, bold, no jargon. No overrides without written approval from compliance. Period. Not a Slack message, not a hallway comment. Written approval, logged and filed. The board chair leaned in. What happens if we say no? I didn't blink. Then you'll need to find someone else willing to clean this up while holding the risk personally, but that won't be me. They looked at each other. Legal was already reviewing the document, red pen hovering but not striking. The CFO nodded once, slowly. The CEO picked up the pen. Brooke didn't speak. She didn't even move. I could feel the shift happen in real time when they realized I wasn't bluffing, that I wasn't just another paper pusher they could push past. I had walked them to the edge of the cliff, handed them a map, and drawn a line that said, fall or follow. I stood, quietly, tucked my backup drive into my jacket pocket. My hand rested on the spiral binder. Not smug, just steady. I'm not asking anymore, I said softly. Choose the fire escape or burn in silence. Then I left the room, let them sit with it. Because for once, they weren't the ones holding the pen. I was. They called me back in the next morning. Polite tones, soft voices. The kind of energy you'd expect if I'd just saved a family heirloom from a house fire, but they weren't quite ready to admit it had been their cigarette that started the blaze. The room looked different this time. More coffee cups, fewer crossed arms. Brooke wasn't there. Out sick, someone said. No one looked me in the eye when they said it. The CEO gestured toward the seat at the end of the table. We've reviewed your addendum, he said carefully. There's general agreement, but we were hoping to frame it more as a partnership. I didn't sit. I placed the binder on the table and tapped the cover. Sign, then we partner. Counsel opened her mouth like she wanted to reframe it again. Softer, cleaner, with some legal cotton wool wrapped around the edges. But the board chair cut her off. Either we do this right, or we keep bleeding, he said flatly. The CEO picked up the pen. It was a deliberate motion, like he wanted me to see it. To see that they were complying now, that the power had shifted. He signed. Then slid it to counsel, who added her initials with a practiced flick of the wrist. It stopped at the HRVP. She stared at the page like it was a noose. Not just because of what it said, but what it meant. That she no longer had veto power over compliance. That her back-channel approvals, her Slack directives, her little empire of shortcuts were now officially out of reach. She hesitated. The room waited. I didn't blink. Is there a problem? I asked, voice flat. She shook her head, signed her name smaller than everyone else, and pushed the page back like it might bite her. I sat, then pulled out the final insert. Quietly, just a single line ready to be slotted into the revised policy language. I slid it forward without explanation. Counsel read it aloud. Removing compliance during active remediation requires written consent from the insurer of record. The room paused. The CFO raised an eyebrow. Smart. I looked at him. I'm not getting fired the next time this becomes inconvenient. The chair gave a half smile. Approved. It was done. The addendum went into the binder. The new policy posted before the end of the day. I got a badge with a new title, Compliance Officer. No office upgrade, no flowers, just authority that finally had teeth. I could halt onboarding with a single email now, and if they ignored it, it triggered an automatic legal escalation. Relief came slow, like a muscle unclenching after weeks of bracing. But I didn't smile, didn't celebrate, because this wasn't a win. It was prevention. The thing about being right in compliance is that you never really win. You just get to clean up before the damage is permanent. No one claps. No one makes a speech. They just act like the bleeding was inevitable and forget who applied the tourniquet. But I didn't need the applause. I needed the ink, and I had it. Now it was time for the reckoning. The final board session wasn't on the official calendar. It was called with 3 hours' notice, no agenda attached, and every senior exec already seated when I walked in. The air had that pre-storm pressure to it. Still, expectant, brittle. No one made small talk. No one looked smug. The only thing on the table was a printout. Mine. The email. Subject line, I-9 exception overrides. Risk and approval. Still crisp, still dated, still time-stamped with the moment I drew my line in the sand. The CEO stood slowly, turned the paper toward the room, and let everyone read the key sentence again. I do not approve these exceptions. Proceeding under HR directive. Then he nodded at me. You've got the floor. I didn't bother with a preamble. I opened the binder, pulled the override log, one sheet, highlighted, 48 names, each linked to an incomplete I-9, each marked with the date of override and the initials logged in the system. I read them out loud, line by line, like a quiet indictment. Some of the board shifted in their seats. Others stayed frozen. Legal's pen moved without pause. The CFO's jaw ticked. The HR VP stared at the table. When I finished, I placed the list down and said, "These aren't hypotheticals. They're audit liabilities, and they were all pushed through after my documented refusal." She finally spoke. Voice thin, false sweet. There was miscommunication. We were under pressure. The assistant may have misunderstood your position. I didn't look at her. I opened the second binder, slid the tamper log across the table. Here's the system activity. October 9th, 11:42 p.m. HR assistant logged in using the group credentials labeled HR Finalize. The macro used was the same one configured on your machine. She blanched. Approval field was overwritten after my lockout protocol was triggered. You can see the red flag here. I pointed. There's no ambiguity. That macro was activated deliberately after I documented my refusal. Still, she tried. I never instructed. The board chair raised a hand, silenced her, then looked at me, then at the room, and asked, with a voice like granite, "Who approved this override?" The silence lasted too long to be awkward, too exact to be uncertain. Then came the words that had been circling the table like a hawk for weeks. "We're requesting your resignation," the CEO said quietly. Not to me, to her. She didn't argue, just nodded stiffly and stood, left the room without gathering her things. No one stopped her. I sat back, didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just opened the final folder and slid it forward. The consulting retainer. Drafted last night after the CFO asked for a post-remediation continuity plan. They didn't want another compliance officer. They wanted insurance, someone who wouldn't just warn them but stop them cold. It was fat. Disgustingly so. A retainer with a veto clause over onboarding policy, embedded audit access, and full data visibility. I wouldn't work there anymore, but I'd still see everything, from a distance. With power, not obligation. I signed the last page in blue ink, countersigned their copy. Then, before I left, I added one condition to the terms of remediation. No hourly worker terminated based on paperwork failures outside their control. Because they didn't cause this mess, they just showed up. It was the suits with Slack accounts and shortcut macros who almost burned it all down. I gathered my things, didn't take the corner office they offered, didn't take the parking spot. I didn't want a desk anymore. I wanted the pen. As I closed the folder and stood, the board chair nodded to me again, this time with respect. I paused, tapped the email printout still on the table. "Call it nitpicking if you want," I said. "The regulator calls it valid." Then I walked out, and the door shut behind me like a full stop.